The killer who blended in too well. The true story of Timothy Krajcir. Part 1. The man everyone trusted. Chapter 1. The neighbor you'd never suspect. For years, Rockford, Illinois had no reason to be afraid of Timothy Krajcir. He lived quietly, paid his bills, spoke politely, kept to himself. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't strange. He wasn't threatening. He was the kind of man people described with a single word: normal. And that normality protected him. Chapter 2. A life that raised no alarms. Timothy Krajcir was born in 1964. He grew up in the Midwest, drifting between ordinary jobs and ordinary routines. He worked as a construction laborer, a maintenance worker, a handyman. He didn't struggle visibly with addiction. He didn't accumulate a long criminal record. He didn't draw attention. Neighbors later told reporters he was quiet, kept his place clean, never caused problems. That description would later become horrifying. Chapter 3. The first kill no one noticed. In 1997, a woman named Kathy Zemer disappeared. She was vulnerable. She was isolated. She was struggling. Her disappearance did not trigger a major investigation. There were no press conferences, no search parties, no sense of urgency. Krajcir had met her through casual social circles. He gained her trust. He invited her to his home. Then he strangled her. After the murder, he did something simple. He cleaned up. No body was found. No witnesses came forward. No one connected her disappearance to him. And Krajcir learned something crucial. He could kill and remain invisible. Chapter 4. Learning the pattern of silence. Over the next several years, Krajcir killed again and again. Each time, the pattern repeated. Women living unstable lives, minimal immediate family contact, delayed missing person reports. Krajcir didn't need elaborate planning. He needed time and indifference. He avoided violence that created noise. He used strangulation, quiet, controlled, personal. He didn't take trophies. He didn't leave signatures. He relied on one thing: people would not look too closely. Chapter 5. A predator without a persona. Unlike many serial killers, Krajcir did not cultivate a public mask. There was no double life to manage. He didn't need one. His real life was already invisible. He spent evenings alone. He watched television. He worked regular hours. Between murders, he lived quietly. No escalation, no taunting, no mistakes. Years passed. Victims accumulated. No one noticed the pattern. Chapter 6. The women who disappeared. By the early 2000s, several women connected loosely to Krajcir had vanished. They were economically vulnerable, socially isolated, not immediately missed. Their names did not circulate widely. Their faces were not on television. Each disappearance was treated as separate. This fragmentation saved him. Chapter 7. Why he was never a suspect. Krajcir was never violent in public, never drunk and aggressive, never threatening. He did not fit the stereotype. Police were searching for unstable addicts, abusive partners, visibly dangerous men. Krajcir was none of those. He was patient, controlled, forgettable. And for serial killers, forgettability is camouflage. Chapter 8. A decade of undetected murder. Between 1997 and 2006, Timothy Krajcir killed multiple women. At least 5 are confirmed. Investigators believe there may be more, but without bodies, without witnesses, without confessions. The true number may never be known. For nearly 10 years he lived freely, not because he was brilliant, but because no one was watching closely enough. Chapter 9. The mistake that ended everything. In 2006, something changed. Krajcir killed Marianne Jaros. This time, the disappearance did not fade quietly. This time, police pushed harder. This time, someone talked. And for the first time, attention turned toward the quiet man who never stood out. Chapter 10: The Beginning of the End. When investigators searched Krajcir's home, they expected nothing. What they found was enough. Not a dramatic scene, not a blood-soaked room, but evidence. Small details, fragments, things that didn't belong. And once the first thread was pulled, the fabric unraveled quickly.
Part 2: Arrest, Confession, and the Murders He Admitted. Chapter 11: The Disappearance That Wouldn't Fade. In October 2006, Marianne Jaros vanished from Rockford, Illinois. At first, her disappearance looked like many others, and stable house and regular contact with familiar life lived quietly on the margins. But this time, someone noticed something different. Marianne didn't just disappear. She stopped existing all at once. No phone calls. No financial activity. No sightings. Friends pushed harder. Family asked more questions. And police listened. Chapter 12: The Name That Kept Appearing. As detectives retraced Marianne's last known movements, one name kept resurfacing: Timothy Krajcir. He was not a boyfriend, not an ex-husband, not a known abuser. He was something far more dangerous, a man who was around, but never central. Witnesses mentioned him casually. She knew him. They talked sometimes. He helped her out. That casual proximity raised alarms. Police decided to look closer. Chapter 13: The Search. When detectives searched Krajcir's home, they didn't find chaos. They found order, clean rooms, organized belongings. No obvious signs of violence, but serial cases rarely break on obvious signs. They break on small inconsistencies. Investigators noticed items that did not belong to Krajcir, personal effects that could not be explained, subtle traces suggesting someone else had been there. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to keep digging. Chapter 14: The First Interview. Krajcir was brought in for questioning. He was polite, calm, cooperative. He answered questions without resistance. He denied involvement in Marianne's disappearance. His tone never changed. His body language remained relaxed. Detectives later said he didn't act nervous, he acted practiced. They let him go, but they didn't let him off the radar. Chapter 15: Pressure without force. Over the following weeks, detectives built pressure carefully. No threats. No coercion. No confrontation. They waited. They re-interviewed witnesses. They compared timelines. They returned to Krajcir with more questions. Each time, his answers remained consistent and empty. Then, during a later interview, something shifted. Not dramatically. Subtly. Chapter 16: I've done some bad things. During a routine follow-up interview, Krajcir paused, looked down, and said quietly, "I've done some bad things." Detectives didn't react. They didn't interrupt. They let the silence stretch. Then he continued. He admitted to killing Marianne Jaros. He described meeting her, inviting her inside, strangling her. No emotional explanation. Just events. Chapter 17: The Confession expands. Since the first confession was made, the barrier collapsed. Krajcir didn't stop at one murder. He admitted to Kathy Ziemer 1997, Heidi Mertes 1998, Lori Sonato 2000, to Deborah Howe 2005, Marianne Jaros 2006. 5 women, all strangled, all killed in quiet, controlled environments. All victims he had known casually. He didn't brag. He didn't dramatize. He spoke as if listing errands. Chapter 18: Why he confessed. Detectives asked the obvious question, why talk now? Krajcir answered simply, I knew it was over. There was no remorse. Narrative. No emotional breakdown. Psychologists later described his confession as acceptance, not guilt. The secrecy had ended, and with it, the effort to maintain it. Chapter 19: No bodies. Still guilt. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was this: most of the victims' bodies were never recovered. Krajcir had disposed of them in ways that left no trace, but his confessions were detailed. He described locations, methods, conversations, details only the killer could know. Prosecutors believed him. So did the Courts. Chapter 20 The Killer Without Denial. Unlike many serial killers, Krajcir did not retract his confession claim. Krajcir insanity accepted responsibility. Not emotionally, but procedurally. He understood what would happen next, and he did not resist it. Chapter 21 The Shape of the Crime Messes. Investigators analyzed the murders. A clear pattern emerged. Victims were socially vulnerable. Murders occurred. Indoor strangulation was the method. Bodies were removed and no witnesses were present. This was not chaotic violence. It was quiet domination. Chapter 22 The Shock of Recognition for families. The confession brought a complex mix of relief and horror. Some finally had answers. Others faced the reality that remains might never be found. The common thread was disbelief. The man who had done this was not frightening, he was forgettable. And that realization was devastating. Chapter 23 Preparing for trial with multiple confessions and corroborating evidence. Prosecutors moved quickly. This would not be a battle over guilt. It would be a reckoning. Part 3 Trial, Life Sentence, and Psychological Profile. Chapter 2 For a trial without doubt. When Timothy Krajcir entered the courtroom, there was no mystery left to unravel. The investigation had already produced detailed confessions to multiple murders, corroborating timelines, witness testimony, physical and circumstantial evidence. This would not be a trial about who committed the crimes. It would be a trial about how a man like this existed undetected for so long. Krajcir sat quietly beside his attorneys. No outbursts, no emotional display. He appeared resigned. Chapter 25 The prosecution's focus. Prosecutors avoided sensationalism. They did not present Krajcir as a theatrical monster. They presented him as something more disturbing, a man who killed repeatedly, quietly, and without visible motive. They emphasized the selection of socially vulnerable victims, the consistent use of strangulation, the absence of provocation, the calculated disposal of body. A state argued that this was not addiction-driven chaos. It was predatory control. Chapter 26 The Defenses. Limited options. Defense faced an almost impossible task. They did not argue innocence. They did not argue insanity. They did not argue coercion. Instead, they attempted to contextualize Krajcir's drug addiction, his unstable housing history, his emotional detachment. But even defense experts acknowledged Krajcir understood his actions. He knew they were wrong, and he chose to commit them anyway. This removed the foundation for any diminished responsibility defense. Chapter 27 Krajcir speaks. Krajcir addressed the court briefly. His statement was flat and controlled. He acknowledged killing the women. He said he was sorry. He did not explain why. Observers noted the absence of emotion, not coldness, but emptiness. One reporter wrote, "He spoke like a man closing an account, not a man facing life imprisonment." Chapter 28 Psychological Evaluation. Court-appointed psychologists presented their findings. Krajcir was diagnosed with antisocial personality traits, emotional detachment, lack of deep empathy. But crucially, he was not psychotic. He was not delusional. He was not legally insane. He showed intact reality testing, full awareness of consequences, consistent decision-making. This placed him firmly in the category of offenders who kill by choice, not compulsion. Chapter 29 The nature of his violence. Experts highlighted what made Krajcir unusual. His murders were quiet, personal, controlled, non-sadistic. There was no torture, no excessive injury, no ritual. This suggested his motivation was not pleasure from suffering, but elimination of resistance. In psychological terms, his violence was instrumental, not expressive. Chapter 30 of Victim Impact Statements. Family members of the victims addressed the court. Some spoke of years spent searching. Others described the shock of learning their loved ones had been murdered long ago. A recurring theme emerged. They disappeared, and no one cared. The courtroom fell silent as families described how long it took for investigations to begin, if they began at all. These statements shifted the focus from the killer to the system that failed to notice. Chapter 31 Sentencing. Judge delivered the sentence without hesitation. Timothy Krajcir was sentenced to multiple consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole if reasoning was clear. Repeated intentional murder, complete absence of mitigating mental illness, ongoing danger to the public. Krajcir did not react. He nodded once, and that was all. Chapter 32 The Killer without illusion in interviews conducted for evaluation. Krajcir never attempted to justify himself. He did not claim childhood trauma, overwhelming addiction, loss of control, and asked why he killed. His answers were minimal. "I didn't stop." That statement revealed something essential. There was no dramatic internal struggle, only continuation. Chapter 3:3. Understanding the Men. Psychologists later described Krajcir as a man who lacked emotional depth, viewed others as functional objects, experienced little internal conflict, avoided attention instinctively. This made him especially difficult to detect. He was not driven to escalate or boast. He did not seek validation. He simply continued until interrupted. Chapter 34. The end of the process. With sentencing complete, Krajcir disappeared into the prison system. No appeals claiming innocence. No public correspondence. No attempts at notoriety. He returned to obscurity, the place where he had hidden for most of his life. Chapter 358. Case without comfort. Trial ended questions of guilt, but it did not resolve the deeper issue. How many people like Timothy Krajcir exist? Not brilliant, not dramatic, not loud, but quiet enough to go unnoticed. That question would linger long after the courtroom emptied. Part for legacy and known victims, and how he stayed invisible. Chapter 36. After the courtroom went quiet, when Timothy Krajcir was led out of the courtroom to begin serving multiple life sentences, the public reaction was brief. There were no nationwide vigils, no endless news cycles, no cultural fixation. Within weeks, the story faded, and in that silence, something unsettling became clear. Krajcir had returned to the same obscurity that had protected him for years. For him, prison was not a fall from fame. It was simply another closed door. Chapter 37. The victims, who may never be counted officially. Timothy Krajcir confessed to 5 murders. Investigators believe there may be more, but without bodies, without witnesses, without timelines. Those additional victims exist only as questions. Cold case analysts have revisited missing person files in Illinois and neighboring states, searching for overlaps in time, geography. Victim profile. Some disappearances align disturbingly well. Others remain uncertain. The truth is likely this: the full scope of Krajcir's violence will never be known. And that uncertainty belongs not to him, but to the families still waiting. Chapter 38. Why his victims stayed invisible. Every confirmed victim shared similar vulnerabilities. Unstable housing, limited family contact, addiction, or financial hardship. Lives lived outside formal systems. Higher disappearances did not trigger alarms. Reports were delayed. Follow-ups were minimal. Connections were not made across years or jurisdictions. Krajcir did not exploit a flaw in one department. He exploited a systemic blind spot, a place where disappearance is treated as choice, not danger. Chapter 39. The myth of the brilliant serial killer. True crime culture often focuses on killers who taunt police, leave signatures, crave attention, seek control through spectacle. Krajcir was none of these. He was not clever in a cinematic sense. He did not design elaborate crimes. He did not manipulate the media. He relied on something simpler and far more common: forgettable normalcy. He lived quietly. He avoided conflict. He blended into the background, and that was enough. Chapter 40. Psychological invisibility. Experts later described Krajcir's defining trait not as cruelty, but emotional absence. He did not rage. He did not fantasize loudly. He did not escalate theatrically. He lacked internal conflict, emotional urgency, need for recognition. This made him stable, and therefore invisible. He did not draw attention because he did not need to. Chapter 41. How he stayed undetected for a decade. Krajcir's long evasion can be traced to a convergence of factors. Victim marginalization. Disappearances were not prioritized. Fragmented investigations. Cases were never connected. Quiet methods. Strangulation left little evidence. Lack of signature. No ritual. No pattern investigators could see. No behavioral red flags. No public violence. No visible instability. None of these alone explain his freedom. Together, they created invisibility. Chapter 42. The cost of that invisibility. Cost was not theoretical. It was measured in years. Years when women vanished without urgency. Years when families searched alone. Years when a serial killer lived freely because no one thought to look closely. Krajcir did not outsmart the system. He waited while it looked elsewhere. Chapter 43. What the case changed in Illinois. The case quietly influenced internal discussions about missing adult prioritization. Data sharing across departments, pattern recognition for vulnerable populations. There was no sweeping reform. No dramatic policy shift, but the case became a cautionary reference, a reminder that danger does not always announce itself. Chapter 44. Remembering the right. Timothy Krajcir does not deserve a legacy. The women he killed do. Their lives were not footnotes. Their struggles were not permissions. Their invisibility was not consent. If this case has meaning, it lies there not in the killer, but in the cost of ignoring people who live on society's margins. Chapter 45. The final reel. Timothy Krajcir was not extraordinary. And that is what makes his case frightening. He did not require brilliance. He did not require cruelty beyond control. He did not require luck. He required indifference. And indifference is common. Chapter 46. End of the story. Prison door closed. The danger ended, but the question remains, how many crimes are not solved because the victims are not noticed? That is the legacy of this case. Not a monster, a mirror.